Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. Parliament is in session, the November session, generally dedicated to the state budget. 7,212.5 billion CFA francs is the budget of 2024 closing up. A higher figure will certainly be voted for 2025, given its charged political events. On Press Hour today, our intention is to see how these figures are translated into impactful reality on the ground for development, moral, human, and infrastructural development of Cameroon. To talk about this topic that is very topical, of course, we have the following guests on the panel. Henry Kwam is an economist. He is Executive Director of Cameroon Economic Policy Institute. We are very, very happy to meet you.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Killian, and good afternoon to my co-panelists. It's an honor to be here. I look forward to the discussion.
The discussion obviously will concern everyone. The budget, the state budget, concerns every Cameroonian. Yes, indeed. Thank you for coming. And just besides you, we have Honorable Nestus Fru Manju, who obviously you know him, has her name on press, a member of Parliament. Welcome to the program, Honorable.
Thank you very much, Killian, and thank you to my co-panelists that we'll be having a fruitful discussion.
You are most welcome. Honorable Blaise Aminde Atabong is a freelance journalist and editor. At the same time, thank you, Blaise. Each time I have anything dealing with finances, budgeting here, I make sure that you are around because your contributions are always insightful. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Killian. It's a pleasure to be on set once again on Press Hour.
Yes, and we're going to move straight away into the program. We start the program each time with press review. This is about Press Hour. Emmanuel Avemny read the newspapers for Press Hour.
News on the November session of Parliament occupy most newspaper columns the week ending. Cameroon Tribune presents November files in Parliament with the examination and adoption of the 2025 state budget at the fore, before pressing for better living conditions in Cameroon Insider with 10 bills already in the House for examination. One of the bills being that on local taxation according to municipal updates. Kavayege Jibril then urges government to guarantee peaceful presidential election in 2025 in the Guardian Post. And immediately, the Cultural Committee of Parliament examines bill on traditional medicine in the Eagle's Eye. As the National Assembly salutes vitalization of the mining sector in the Guardian Post, Senator Fon Chafa is elected Inter-Parliamentary Union Working Group member in the same paper. Honorable Malomba and partners on their part offer didactic materials to pupils in 6 schools in municipal updates. Death toll of the Chanclive landslide then moves to 12 as search efforts continue in Cameroon Insider. At the time, Camto denounces abandonment of Chanclive victims in the Post. Body of 72-year-old man is recovered from rubbles in the Chanclive landslide site in the Guardian Post. At the same time, the paper reports that Climate Change Observatory has warned of imminent landslides in the west and northwest regions, after that in Chang. Government then plans new road projects to avoid Chanclive in Cameroon Insider. Before the UN is reported on the throat of separatist fighters for disrupting schools in the northwest and southwest regions in the Herald Tribune. To the Guardian Post, UN allegedly puts Biya on hot seat with tough conditions should he want to seek re-election. 15 secessionists then drop arms in Mehmet Division in Cameroon Insider. At a time, former UN Assistant Secretary of State for Africa Thibault Nagy predicts hard times for Yaoundé if Trump picks certain floating names. President Biya then hopes for close ties with Trump in Cameroon Insider. CDC workers then go on strike, but GM assures them of arrears payments soon in municipal updates, then calls for calm as prompt measures are underway to remedy plight. in the Eden. The Guardian Post presents Anglophones making a difference in the management of public institutions in Cameroon. PCC celebrates 67th Independence Day amid trust betrayed by leadership. Headlines breaking news Beleng. Disgruntled PCC Christians accuse leaders of ungodly practices in the Herald Tribune. Cameroon Insider reports that PCC Day celebrated as synod elections loom, and as Municipal Updates presents Funky's towering legacy at helm of PCC, the Guardian Post says moderator apologizes to church and pleads for forgiveness in the 67th PC Day message, before reporting on drama in Yaoundé court as legal battle against the Cameroon Baptist Convention leadership opens. The case is adjourned to November 14 in breaking news Beleng. Ace journalist Kenneth Kanasobo is enthroned fond of opinion in the Post. Just when Traditional Council and Kingmakers petition DO decrying sabotage in Manyemen chief designate in the Guardian Post. 50,000 Cameroonians are said to live in Canada in Municipal Updates. Until I come your way again, this is your Hour with the Press. And those were the papers for you.
Yes, Emanuela, we look forward to having you next Sunday, God willing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Press Hour, and we are broadcasting live from Studio 4 of CRTV Production Center and Balatu in Yaoundé. Our topic is the budget in figures and execution. Is the figures and execution, is there a balanced account somehow? Do you have what the figures state on paper, on the ground? That is exactly what we're going to look about on today's edition of Press Hour. I've introduced the panelists to you just to pick the journalists to tell us, after following the press review, what is the issue that caught your attention that we can have as a talking point on this program. Bless Amende.
Yeah, I think what caught my attention, like would catch the attention of any other journalist, is the only conference center where proceedings are taking place, the National Assembly proceedings for the month of November. And so far, the National Assembly has received a couple of draft bills. And of those bills, one that caught my attention is the bill on protection of personal data. And I think we've been preaching and talking much about becoming a diversified digital economy by 2035. So it was important that this bill came to Parliament for deliberations, in the sense that we can't be talking about a digital economy without having legislation on data protection. But I already pick holes on the draft of that legislation, which I think the MPs will correct in the course of the deliberation. Like, for instance, there is no clarity on the independence of the Personal Data Protection Authority, which will be established from that bill. And also, I think it is very important that on the bill, there should be no limitation, like when it comes to collection of personal data, all entities collecting data must seek prior consent. It's not very clear on that. The bill is not very clear on that, and I think our MPs will correct that during their deliberations.
You just ended where I wanted to.
Yeah.
It's a bill.
Yeah.
Which means
I hope that by the time we'll have...
they would have had those corrections
exactly.
if they deem that things to correct, and some others you have not talked about.
Yeah, we are
Thank
hoping
you.
so, but in the past we've been disappointed. So, but we hope things are going to change. And also one other thing, which is a bit of concern to me, is the fact that we've had, I think, close to 14 draft bills so far, which has been tabled. But among those draft bills, we don't have the draft finance law for 2025, which is a bit worrisome to me, because first of all, when you look at the legislation on public finance, you realize that this bill was supposed to have been tabled to the Bureau of the National Assembly 15 days before the session opened.
Latest 15 days.
Yes, which was not done. And so far, I have it on good authority that the draft bill is still not at the National Assembly. So I don't think it was important to bring some of these other bills, which are not really related to finance, to crowd the MPs who have to read a lot of... When you look at the draft bill and its annexes, it's close to thousands of pages. And if they don't have it yet, and they have to discuss and conclude on it in the short time that's remaining, it's going to be really problematic. I don't think we really have much time to assimilate that document and make a proper examination before adopting it.
Honorable he sounds so convincing. The finance bill, the draft bill, which is not there, you were supposed to have it long before last Tuesday when Parliament opened. And as we know, there are different bills that are coming in. Is that not going to distract or overcrowd you on your focus for November, the budget, the state budget?
Thank you very much, Killian. To begin with, I'm so proud and happy that and elated that the activities of Parliament are being followed up by Cameroonians, and to have had Mr. Aminde talk about having been tabled 14 bills that have been communicated this far. It doesn't mean that others have not been tabled. There are other bills that have been tabled, but they have not been communicated, because tabling the bill is one thing. Communicating the bills to the MP is the second process. It's the third process, sorry. Because when the bill is tabled, there is a conference of presidents that sits and deliberate and statute on the reservability of the bills. And once they have been deemed admissible, they are now communicated to members of Parliament and are assigned to a committee that will examine the nitty-gritties and of that particular bill. This far, 14 bills have been communicated to members of the National Assembly, and the committees are at work. And amongst those bills, you have a wide range of bills, my brother, such that Cameroonians can rest assured that the Parliament is working for the good of every Cameroonian. It's not only the budget that is important. You have to understand that every aspect and every sphere of national life is being covered by the National Assembly. And that's why we have been sent there by you to represent your interests and to take into consideration everything that works for the well-being of every Cameroonian, because His Excellency President Paul Biya wants the best for every Cameroonian.
Thank you. Henry Kwam,
Yes.
do you pick holes in the bills, or you have something else
Well,
to
I
add?
mean, there are 14 bills, and it's a lot. And the bills range from human rights, execution, right up to local finance. But like my colleague Aminde said, the issue of data is really important. And just to come back to that, we've signed 2 trade agreements with Europe, but also with 52 other African countries. And so we have to make sure that we have a good grasp of how our data will be managed, how, if at all, it's going to be monetized, and whether and how this data is going to be stored to protect local consumers. So that's really, really important. However, one thing that stuck out to me was the bill on local taxes, because we obviously have to raise quite a bit of revenue in order for us to be able to afford not only investments but also credible investments in social infrastructure, education, hospitals, etc. So that's important because local governments play a very important role in ensuring that the state can meet its objectives when it comes to taxes. Now, I am just a little bit surprised because ultimately, there are already bills that exist which show exactly how local taxes are shared from FACOM to the central government, and percentages have been attached on different values from land to capital. So I think on the whole, a bit more clarity on how the budget process is going will be good. But it's also important for us to point out that Parliament doesn't have to sit for 2 months to debate the budget, because ultimately there is a majority in Parliament, and I think the majority understands along what lines the budget is going to be designed, executed and run. However, for better scrutiny on behalf of civil society, it's important that these things happen early so that we have clarity on what the budget will be and what the various mechanisms for execution are equally going to be.
Thank you very much. Honorable, you are so
Killian.
itchy to react to
No,
that,
it's
because I
not a
thought we should
reaction,
just go into our topic. Yes, go ahead.
We have to understand that in as much as you're talking about the execution of the budget, in as much as you want to see that the budget is voted for 2025, you have to understand equally that 2023 settlement bill has been tabled, and it has to be adopted, and it has to be scrutinized. So until that is done, to see that what was the execution of the budget in 2023 was according to the norms, practices, and that there was no haphazard execution of the budget, then we know that we are moving forward. So that has been tabled, and amongst other bills that were tabled, you have the bills on the fishery sector. You have a bill that talks about the geographical location of our productions, of our products, it will interest you to know that some of our products, because of the fact that they have a geographical location ascribed to them, like the pepper, Penja pepper, or like the red cocoa from Cameroon, which has already gotten international accreditation, it gives an added value to the product in itself. And by geolocalizing it to Cameroon, it sells out the image of the country. So Parliament is doing a lot of work to make sure that Cameroon comes out of this niche that has, or this underdevelopment that we have been suffering for too long.
Yes,
emerge.
go ahead, Henry. I want us to get out of
just
this,
one
but you are
question.
so
You know,
interested.
the EU has signed, the EU has tabled the EU deforestation law. And so I wonder whether, just to say that geolocalization is really important, and maybe it's something that we should have done earlier, but I wonder whether, because we've got 6 months, the private sector has 6 months to implement the new EU deforestation regulation. And so I think this is topical and useful in that regard, but I wonder whether it's something which we should have done
I
earlier.
know about that law. Some of us are not very comfortable with it. The reason is simple. We're supposed to stop felling down our trees, exploiting our trees, but the law postpones that kind of making sure that we stop felling down and exploiting
essentially the law
on transformed forest resources.
Yes.
So they were supposed to stop it so that we
were supposed to do it before the EU imposed it on us.
We benefit. We don't get second-hand benefit, we get first-hand benefit. Well, that is not the issue. When Honorable Nestus was talking about the bills, you talked about the importance of tabling these bills, and one of the bills that you talked about is the settlement bill that clears the way for you to move forward. That is exactly why we are here. It is directly related to the topic that we have today on Press R. That is the budget in figures and execution. Is there a balance, kind of direct relationship between what we have as a budget? We have figures every year. We're at 4,000, moved to 5,000. We are 6,000, 7,000 at the end of this year, 7,212.5 billion CFA francs for the public budget. It will be higher in 2025. When we look at it, the figures, and look at what is executed on the ground, are we convinced that they are the figures? That is exactly what we are talking about. Now, Honorable, the budget of last year and of 2023, that's the settlement bill you're talking about, and 2024. Let us compare these two before we move forward to asking whether these figures produce results, palpable results on the ground.
Yes, Killian, I wouldn't be here to give a pass mark or a fail mark to execution of government budget, but I'm here to talk about the procedure for budget validation, budget voting, and the control of its execution. If you ask me to talk about the control of the execution of the budget, I would say that the budget of 2024 this far is being controlled and is being executed according to the norms. And that is why, even if you have at the level of the regions and at the level of the divisions, you have the regional follow-up committee for investment budgets, you have the divisional follow-up committees for investment budgets. Most of these committees are either chaired by members of the National Assembly or members of Parliament. And this committee is charged with the follow-up of the execution, physical as well as financial execution of this budget, and see to it that whatsoever was given to the regional structures are being executed for the purpose for which it was meant and according to the norms and standards of execution of budgets.
Why we brought up this topic is you appear to be talking about theory, what is supposed to
No,
happen.
I'm talking about practice.
Well, you just talked about part of the budget. the public investment budget. The budget goes beyond that. We have other aspects of the budget. Now, let us stay with you for a while on the public investment budget. So when you go around and look at the roads, the schools, the hospitals, other infrastructure, do they actually reflect what you have in the budget? That's what we are talking about. That's what the topic of today is all
In terms of rates
about.
of completion.
Yes.
In terms of, I would say that every public contract has terms of references. And what the contractor is called upon to execute, that is what, and that is what we verify that they have executed. And when we go around and you go to the field, you see that the terms of references of these contracts are respected. Now, as to the quality of the work, if the terms of reference did not require a particular contractor to use particular material, you cannot come and impose that on that contractor to use those material. So we have to look at the terms of references of the contracts that are being awarded, that they are well worded.
Now, when
Once they are well worded, then we will follow up and see that the wordings and the wordings are materialized by the fiscal executions. The contracts are being executed according to the terms of references. They are being received, and the procedure is respected. So you have no reason to say this contract was not executed. Or
no, we are. That's not what we are saying. You are a member of Parliament, a member of the National Assembly, one of the houses of Parliament, and the functional role of Parliament is to control government action. That's why we are asking you, that you are declaring that all these works that are done, sometime for a road, for example, which is supposed to be there for 30 years. We know roads are done, when they are well done, they should be 30 years, 20 to 30 years before they get bad. So they are received, as you say, 1 year, 6 months, 1 year after the roads are bad. Are you actually controlling government action? That is why we are here. We're talking about the budget in figures and execution. But when you look at those things, they balance up. That is where
Killen, you shouldn't mix up what ought to be with what actually is. I'm talking about what actually is. What actually is what you find on the field. If the terms of reference of a particular contract do not warrant the usage of material that is durable, then you don't expect the road to be durable. You don't expect the construction site to be, the infrastructure to be durable. So what we are saying is that the terms of reference for the execution of a particular contract should be worded in such a way that quality material is used for the construction of quality infrastructure.
And when that happens, yeah, I will just come to you. The last question to Honorable Nestus. Last question, as those who control government action. When it happens that way, well, do you have that temerity to go up to a minister, sitting minister, who maybe gave out that contract and say, no, why did you give a contract to someone to construct something to be durable, sustainable, and it has happened this way? Are you not supposed to hold such a person accountable?
If you realize, we have been having several working sessions with several ministers.
Okay.
Some of those working sessions are meant to draw their attention to certain usages on the field which are not orthodox and which their collaborators are called upon to sit up and review the manner in which certain issues are handled. It is not a pressure organization. The National Assembly is not a pressure group. It is a group meant to make sure that the people, the Cameroonian people, they live well because they are representing the interests of the people. We represent the interests of the people, so we have to draw the attention of the sitting ministers that, look, this particular contract has not been executed well because the terms of reference of this particular contract were not in line with the aspirations and the well-being of the Cameroonian people. In subsequent edition, if we have to do this, we think we have to do because it's not, doesn't suffice to
yes.
them
Talking
to
about-
give a way
yes.
out.
When I listen
We're
to
talking
the-
about accountability.
When I
here,
listen to
Killian.
the MP speak, I have the impression that he lives in a vacuum. Because when you go to the field, I've had the opportunity to cover a couple of divisional follow-up committee for the public investment budget, public investment projects in particular. Now, when you attend these meetings, these follow-up committees at divisional level, where MPs are also part of the committees, you realize that the problem when it comes to execution of public investment budget, those projects, they are recurrent. Late award of contracts. Imagine you award contracts for your construction in August, maybe September when it's raining, where the contractor cannot execute. And then the problems are recurrent over the years. That's why you see nationally we've not been able to hit about 80% execution of our, in our public investment budget. And now also when it comes to award, the award of contracts and follow up, it's very tricky because behind the scenes you realize that most of these contracts, their beneficial owners or the contractors who take these contracts are people like the MP who are supposed to control the government action. I'm telling you. So if there was a possibility that when it comes to some of these companies that take contracts, and we can really know who their beneficial owners are, it's going to help for accountability's sake.
There are
because
laws for
some
that.
of these we don't have some of this information, and some of those companies that take these contracts, their beneficial owners are MPs, are mayors, and when it comes to those committees, they just talk, and then everything is put under the gutter.
There is
and
no,
these are people
there is
who are
no,
supposed to control some of these issues that are.
I want to come in here to say something very important. A member of parliament is not a contractor.
But they do contracts
No,
do
not
contracts.
as members of parliament, sir.
Yes.
as well.
They could own
No,
shares
Well,
in
not
a
as members of
company,
parliament.
For example.
Killian as journalist is different from Killian as Killian in the quarter. Some people were business people before getting into parliament. And when they got into parliament, they didn't kill their businesses because they were parliamentarians. They maintained their businesses as the individual. So if Nestus Frumanju sitting here, if I were a business person, which I am not, if I were a business person and I had my company, that company should not be associated to Nestus Frumanju as a parliamentarian. No.
But it should,
And you
because
see
that's
no
a conflict
conflict
of
of
interest.
No.
You won't see any conflict of interest in that.
No,
That is a
no.
conflict of
There
interest.
is always, you should learn to dissociate the individual from the office and function that he holds. If I am executing my function as a parliamentarian, I'm there to control government action, I execute it as a parliamentarian.
I followed. You continue. I followed some decrees signed by the President of the Republic 2-3 days ago, talking about the type of people who should in the
public investment contracts. Who?
No, this one was in the military tribunal. Well, it goes military justice. It goes for so many others. These are some of the clauses. You have to swear, take an oath that you are honor, integrity in the office and anywhere you are, as long as you are an official in that position.
So it comes down to accountability.
Yes, which means that as parliamentarian, that's what I'm saying. How do you leave parliament, then immediately go back and sit
No,
on
what the MP is telling us, what the MP is telling us is that if there was a contract in his constituency where his company is executing and he has to control, make some checks and balances.
As long as he discloses, it is fine. The law is clear. If you're a shareholder, if you're on the board of a company that has a contract, you can, as long as you disclose it, it is fine because those companies were existing before you. A member of parliament might be on the board of a company. It doesn't mean that member of parliament owns the company. A member of parliament could have bought shares in the company and owns 10% of a company. They're allowed to execute contracts, but they have to disclose who is on the board and whether there are any conflicts of interest. End of story. So it's not to preclude members of parliament from not owning businesses. However, there is an endemic problem of corruption which I think we're going to come to. But we're talking about the execution of the budget. Last year the budget was increased from 6,600 to 7,212. Now we don't only have to focus on roads because it's like you said earlier, it's more than roads. We have to focus on roads infrastructure. Only 60% of it was completed. Energy, 45%. Healthcare, only about 50%. On the education sector, based on the statistics that are released by the relevant ministry, it's 40%. water supply is the most advanced at 55%. Now, if we really want to be honest about if we want to be confident that the budget is being executed, we should know what projects are being executed. Because the Douala-Yaoundé Highway is going to be done in 3 phases. Phase 1 has already been complete. So if a member of parliament sits here today and says, but that project has been completed, it's because we're looking at 1 phase. Some of these projects happen in 3 phases. So you've got the industrial zone in Douala, for example. That hasn't been fully completed, but it had to be completed this year. It's not a multi-year project. It's 20% for a 230 billion project. So some of these projects which are vital aren't being executed. And Honorable here, of course, is very passionate about the issue, and with the divisional delegate of Minat, they visited a range of schools in Bamenda. But we know when we talk about the budget not being executed effectively or having doubts that it's being executed effectively, it's because if we don't have the capacity to house our the IDPs and citizens of Cameroon in classrooms, then when we see the figures that are presented by the relevant authorities, we believe them easily, because a 40% execution or a 50% execution isn't acceptable in a country where 40% of the population live below the poverty line, which is growing at about 10 to 20% each year, and where access to basic services like health and education are spotty.
That is the general statistic. In some parts of the country, you have up to 67%
yes.
of the people living under the poverty line.
Yes, multidimensional poverty. It's important that when the 40% statistic talks, it refers to the poverty level according to the World Bank, $1.50 a day, which is about 1,400. About 1,100. That statistic alone does not represent what most Cameroonians go through. Do we have access to basic education, quality education that we can compare with our peers across the region and across the world?
Access to education we have in Cameroon. Access, yes, to education.
Access
you cannot deny that.
Quality.
Yeah.
Well,
Now, if we're talking about the veracity and the effectiveness of the budget, we should be talking about the teacher-to-student ratio, the number of students per laptop or per computer in any given school. That's where we're going to judge whether the budget is really being effective. If we're talking about roofs, we're not even at that point yet, because there's still schools that really need vital infrastructure like waterways, and we're having schools crumbling left, right, center. Now, this is not to say that some progress has been done. The Babaju-Bamenda Road, which is vital, has been completed. Chad, Douala has also been completed. Now we have 1 million 1 million tons worth of goods passing on 20,000 trucks. 3 years ago, it was a quarter of that number. So yes, some progress has been made. However, the implementation of the budget as of now, I think is spotty at best, because even if you look at just road rehabilitation projects in the littoral region at 50%, that's the economic capital of Cameroon.
Yes. Now, the question at one time in Cameroon, we had the structural development program.
Structural adjustment program.
Adjustment
yes.
program. Is there no need for us to have that?
No, well, we have to be clear that the IMF has always called for Cameroon to adjust structurally. But what does a structural adjustment program mean? It's a program that allows us to make targeted investments whilst reducing our debt. The IMF has said that we cannot spend money subsidizing for. We've been subsidizing for since Cameroon got its independence, but we've also had Sonara, which means that we're refining all of the money which we've invested in subsidizing fuel. If we took that money and we invested in Sonara as a refinery, we'll be producing the fuel that we need for our own cars. So yes, we do need to adjust structurally. Whether or not it needs to happen wholly on an IMF model is a completely different question, because the IMF is still talking about access to education. The IMF is still talking about making sure that at least 80% of girls complete primary school and secondary school. We have to
structural adjustment. Also,
yes.
I've had economists here who have talked about regional hubs of development.
Yes, industrial hubs like they're creating in Douala, like they wanted to create in Kribi. But didn't work out. Like you've gone Silicon Mountain in Boya. Those are industrial hubs that would work. And you're right to say that where the IMF, for example, wasn't entirely correct is that in the past the IMF said that we should go and locate all manufacturing plants close to Douala. That is ridiculous. You cannot move all of the manufacturing plants around Douala because they want us to export them quicker. In Cameroon, food insecurity is a problem. Inflation was 7% last year. If you went to the market today and you bought a bunch of banana for 1.5, next year imagine paying 1,900 or 1,800 for a bunch of banana.
Well, it fluctuates. You cannot
Yes.
just give one figure. It
Well,
fluctuated
true.
to 7.
7% last
Yeah,
year.
but-
This year, it could
has
be
been-
between 5 and 6%. But the point is, in order for us to improve the quality of life of Cameroonians, we have to ensure that we understand what is being done, because we can say that globally 60 or 70% of the budget has been executed. But if you look at the Lompanga Dam, it's 40%. If you look at things like the Sustainable Agriculture Project, financed by the German Federal Ministry of Economic and Cooperation, that has advanced, about 30%. Our own urban development projects in Yaoundé, which includes a range of things from waste management to sustainable agriculture, is around 40%.
Now, let us be very simple.
Yeah.
Come down to the ground. A Cameroonian who is living in one remote area, how does that Cameroonian feel the execution of the budget that touches them wherever they are to say yes? Do we have that?
Well, that depends. It depends, isn't it, on where the project is being implemented. Now, for example, we know that the Douala-Yaoundé highway is being developed. Babaju-Bamenda Road was being developed, isn't it? So the people there, the farmers there, are going to benefit. But if you live in a remote area of Maiduguri, where the Chinese have sponsored the phase 1 of a project to install cameras because due to the
Maiduguri is in Nigeria?
insecurity. No, in the far north.
Yeah, Maiduguri.
Yes.
No. It's
It's
Nigeria.
in Nigeria.
It's not Mindanao.
Sorry, it's the it's in Maiduguri. Well, the border, the far north border,
Yes, with
which
Nigeria.
is with Nigeria,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes, you
those
have-
are
you have-
the most far away places.
Yes.
The investments there aren't investments that, the education, yes, but we're investing in things like cameras because we want to improve security against Boko Haram. I misspeak because, of course, that's where it originated from.
Okay.
But so some of these regions, the investments that they have, yes, on the whole, it's important for that particular region, but it's not going to touch the lives of the everyday people as much as we want it to.
It is said that, Honorable, and Aminde, you deal with matters of finances. Why we are quarreling, I want to qualify it as quarreling over the budget and its execution, the reward rate, is because so many analysts have said that we have a problem of governance. That is where it comes from. What's your take on that? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think it's a big problem because when you look at the budget, you realize that over the years we've been having supplementary budgets, which doesn't speak well, which means that maybe the executive branch of government that did prepare the budget did not do a proper forecast in terms of different economic indicators like inflation and all of that. You realize that in the supplementary budget which we have this year, 538 billion CFA, which the Assembly passed recently, and the government had to go in to look for funds to supplement this budget, and where I think the Minister of Finance and team went to the UK, and through private placement they could get about 550 million US dollars, and you can imagine the rate. It was about 10.75%. That's far beyond
what we've paid in the past.
Yeah,
usually we
beyond
pay
what we've paid in the past. So
but
it's
desperation means that they
desperation
just
and all of that. So I think that's where the problem
increase the
begins.
interest rates.
And I think the MPs, or maybe they don't do a good job when it comes to scrutinizing the budget, maybe because of lack of time. Because if a good job was done, we would not always find ourselves each year having a supplementary budget, which is passed by if a good job was done, we will not find ourselves having supplementary budgets. And this supplementary budget actually do stress even the executive that has to execute this, because they have to source for money. Like if you look at what we have to cover in this 2014 supplementary budget, there are things that we could have predicted, like we owe teachers, we owe internal debts, we need to clear them. It's not like it just came at the spur of the moment that we need to pay internal debts. We know we owe internal debt and we need to clear them because these are people's.
and that's really a public finance management issue.
So those are
Really,
some of the
that's
issues
what
which.
it is.
Yes, you raised a very important issue. You have to understand that the macroeconomic dynamics, they do change. And when you do a budget, it's a provisionary forecast. It doesn't mean that it is static, and it doesn't mean that it is on the modifiable. It could be modified. So that's why the law gives the President of the Republic the latitude through an ordinance to modify a finance budget such that it takes into account the realities of the time. The challenges are enormous. We previewed the debts of teachers, and internal debts are usually very much the debts of the state are usually very much a priority for our budgeting, and that was done. But unfortunately, you may not. There are moments that the work has not really been completed. Then you do a projection. Then once the work is completed, you see that the projection either falls short of some figures or goes above certain figures. There is need for adjustment. So in a nutshell, ordinances come to regularize, to adjust the budget so that it suits the realities.
We're always adjusting, unlike other
Yes, even in planning, when you are doing whatever building you want to build, your structure,
your cash flow statement, if
you always do some adjustments.
Adjust the forecast. No, that's true, because Russia's war in Ukraine simply means that we import 45% of our fertilizer from Russia. Our the sunflower seed and sunflower oil market, Ukraine owns a significant portion in Cameroon. So when prices rise, of course we have to adjust.
So you could not have predicted that war.
Yes, there are things
that are unforeseen.
But can I just come back to this issue of salaries? You know that between 2023 and 2024, the amount of the budget used to pay salaries either for public sector employees has increased, but somehow we always hear grievances. In CDC in Tico, for example, there were grievances about people not being paid for 3 years. That is unacceptable.
CDC, those are parastatals, and their budget, they produce.
I mean, only Semri and so the Cotton are making a profit. Only two of them have made a profit.
Yes,
the crisis that
you wouldn't ignore the climate, the socio-economic climate that reigns in this area, and there are certain things that you cannot impute on management.
Everything is under control.
There are certain things that you cannot impute on management. Those are unforeseen, and the productivity of these particular structures
have fallen.
Yes, they have dropped.
Still exporting.
They have dropped. I wouldn't use the word fallen. They have dropped. They have dropped
significantly.
And when they drop significantly, it calls for some adjustments. And the fact that they are having arrears, the state is coming in to see that they solve the situation of these Cameroonians who have worked. And they have families to cater for.
Honorable,
and the state,
should we wait 3 years?
No. There is a process.
Well,
everything has a process, my brother. Those are public finances. It's your money. It is his money. It's the Cameroonians' money. So we cannot just use it the way we want to. There is a procedure which must be respected, because even the person ordering for that payment, he himself has a life to lead. He will not want to order for payments that he himself tomorrow will be charged for misappropriation of state funds.
Thank you very much. Back to our focus, and the last part of this program is to look at how the public budget can be better used in such a way that we feel it, we see it, and we touch it on the ground more than what we have. We're going to start with you, Henry Kwam.
So at CEPI, we've done quite a bit of work on public finance, and what we find consistently year on year is that we simply have to strengthen public finance management. We need to make sure that if 1,000 is set aside to pay teachers or to invest in a particular infrastructure, it's used for that. Yes, there are extenuating circumstances and we should make allowances for that, but if a budget is set, we should use a budget for that. Secondly, capacity building is already happening with civil servants. They're being sent left, right, center. But we also need to see that capacity building is working. We need to ensure that there's better engagement with you, Killian, with the rest of the media, on how projects are being executed at different levels of government. We cannot always have this, having a parliamentarian here essentially is really good because we get to understand how things are happening. Thirdly, we need enhanced civic participation. If we don't interest Cameroonians to tell them that the reason you don't have waterways in your local quartier is because you haven't gone and looked at what the local budget is for you, we're not going to have sustainable development over the long run. And finally, we need regular audits and performance evaluations. For everyone in every company has a performance evaluation at the end of the year. In companies, it happens. In the public sector, it should also happen.
Yes, and that takes me to one aspect which the state has come out on, telling government, different branches of the government, not to buy cars, for example,
Yes.
administrative cars,
Well, I mean, of course.
some other material. But
Yes.
sometimes we
I mean, they were
don't see
buying
this.
up till
We don't see
a
this
few months
happen.
ago.
Yes. This is just an example. What are the other things that should be done?
Well, also we have to improve like interministerial coordination, because you find now that in Cameroon, for example, 2 million people are exposed to climate change. 2 million people face a high risk of extreme climate events, and so it's no longer just the Ministry of Public Works that we have to think about, or urban planning, but also the Ministry of Environment and ONAC, which is responsible for monitoring climate change and ensuring adaptation in that regard. So we need better interministerial coordination, because for one ministry or for one locality, it's not just about investing in a corn farm, but it's making sure that you invest in the corn farm, but also plant trees around to prevent high winds, thereby protecting agricultural productivity.
Yes. How can we better manage the budget in such a way that people feel it more than we have now?
Yes, in addition to what the analyst has said, I want to mention that we should increase the level of digitalization of our processes in order to ensure transparency. A lot is being done in that light, but I think we could do more so that there is actually transparent in terms of managing public finances. One other thing which I feel is important to do.
When you talk about digitizing,
Yes.
yes,
Digitalization of processes.
Yes.
Like for instance, now previously, I will give an example. Like previously, we want to legalize document administration of external relations, you pay cash, but now it's done online. So that gives some level of assurance that there's accountability and transparency in collection.
Yeah. Even tendering for public contracts.
So
now
I think
happen on digital
it's been done,
platforms.
but we could hasten that process because 2035 is just at the corner. And then one other thing which I think could also be done so that the locals can feel the impact of some of these projects is that some of these projects, we really have the local expertise. It actually pains me when some public contracts, we give them to foreign firms. It's unacceptable with the level of ingenuity we have in this country. Like take for instance, passport production, we give it to a foreign firm. ID card production, we give it to a foreign firm. We have the materials here, we have the expertise. A lot of guys are doing a lot of things at Silicon Mountain. They can produce all these things. And if these projects are given to local enterprises, you can imagine the multiplier effect when capital stays back home. So
but
I think
you are the ones crying every day foul on corruption. When some of these foreign companies come, they control the level of corruption.
if they are not doing anything superficial when it comes to the system that was put in place, like for instance the passport production system, like the ID card production system. There are local firms who can do that and put in place the same level of transparency that we are seeing in the process at the moment. So it's not like it's some type of rocket science they are doing. No, if we can do that and we have the expertise, I can give you some companies that can actually do that.
That is wonderful. I love the sense of patriotism that you exhibit. And you have to understand that most of these companies, most of these processes, like the production of passports, is based on build, operate, and transfer. Yes, when the tenders are launched, most Cameroonians, they shy away from them. And that's why you see finally you have international organizations or firms, they come and tender, and then they have the financing, they mobilize the finances, and they do what they have to do.
That's not entirely accurate, because when you look at some of these tenders, they are restricted and international.
Well, true.
I
Some
can
of
cite
them are
you a
also
couple of
quite like, if you do something like the passport, how many companies in Cameroon have the money to execute that at once, at short notice? The capacity might be there, just like with the port, isn't it? Bolore had it for 25 years, not because we didn't have very smart startups that could create an integrated system, but it's also just the cost of...
The funding is always a problem.
The cost, yes,
the
cost of
not always a problem.
implementing
So if you
it.
take, for instance...
well, some of these ones, the funding is problem.
Funding is a major problem.
Expertise also.
I can
We
give you
have
an
the expertise,
example.
but sometimes the
The
funding
Australian
is,
firm that got the contract
huge.
for the mine in Adamawa, They are sourcing for funding. They didn't have the funding.
Yeah, but they have
Yeah, well, if
access. They have access to a large pool of capital.
Even our own Sonamin could still get the stuff and look for funding, just like they are looking for funding. So funding,
that is why government is putting in structures that is going to cater for all of that.
Yeah, but it's taking so long.
Going to take cater for all of that.
No,
we are coming back now to the budget.
Yes.
How do we do to ameliorate the budget and see that the execution rates are actually the fiscal execution meets the financial execution?
Thank you. That is the question.
This calls for the consciousness of each and every Cameroonian. Consciousness of the person who is tendering, consciousness of the person who mounts the tender files, what we call dossier d'appel d'offres, the terms of references. We have to be conscious that you and I have the responsibility to build this nation and hand it over to the next generation that is coming. You and I are accountable for the finances that are put at our disposal by the state budget for the realization of infrastructure, realization of artifacts and whatsoever. You and I have the responsibility, and we are accountable to the Cameroonian people who have vested their confidence in us to make sure that their well-being is guaranteed. Once we don't have this sense, this high sense of patriotism, high sense of commitment and consciousness to what we are called to do, we will not do anything.
You take me to the next point, which is the absence of effective sanctioning of those who do not do what they're supposed to do. I think instead of just calling on the consciences of Cameroonians, we should put in place a kind of red brigade for control of the whoever executes the budget. And if it's not done, punishment is severe.
The UN is going to say that we have to be careful about human rights abuses, and we have to make sure that we punish people in a way that doesn't compromise their human rights. That's true. However, I do agree that it needs to be clear that where there is corruption, there needs to be a clear procedure. Are we seizing assets? Are they going to prison for a period of time? Are they immediately kicked out of the government and they can't hold any public office? We need that kind of accountability for our country to get better. Because unfortunately, if we allow our leaders to live in a way that doesn't reflect the wants and the will of the people, then it becomes pernicious. If you look at the amount of money we spend on cars and for the upkeep of our leaders, it can fund 2 cities. It could make 2 small towns like Limbe and Kumba into smart cities. So maybe we have to move to a much more practical form of management where, yes, we live in difficult places and we need 4x4s, but maybe this 4x4 shouldn't be costing 100 million francs CFA. In other countries where they use reasonable cars, those leaders are equally doing very well and they're doing really, really good jobs. So before we ask the public to want to be accountable, the government itself should hold itself to account. And it's not just passing communiques, but making sure that we spend in a way that reflects our realities. Because when one person lives with a 100 million car, and you have kids who sit 3 in the bench in the classroom or don't have access to potable water, it's a bit difficult to justify that kind of governance.
Yeah, Killian, the government has all the structures that are necessary to execute, to punish or to sanction practices that do not actually honor the execution of the state budget. But the problem is, are we very conscious of that? Are we as ourselves conscious of the fact that we have to? Because the Supreme State Audit is there.
Yes, Consupe.
Consupe, you cannot know the number of cases that have gone to Consupe for mismanagement, misappropriation. The special tribunal is there to handle cases. Special criminal tribunal is there to handle cases of embezzlements
from a certain amount.
From a certain amount, you have the ordinary courts. They are there to handle cases of embezzlement. The penal code has provisions that sanction or that condemn the embezzlement of.
So what you are saying is that they should be applied.
They should be applied. Cameroonians should be conscious. even the judges should be conscious. Those executing the contracts should be conscious. Even those of us voting the laws, we are conscious of the fact that we are doing something to better the conditions of every Cameroon.
Thank you, Blaise Aminde. We're going to start with you. We are moving out of our time on this set. What take-home message do you have from this topic of today? The budget in figures and execution. How can we balance that in such a way that when you look at the figures and look at the execution on the field, you say, yes, this is what we wanted and this is what we have?
Yeah, I think one of the issues which I have realized over time is that there is inadequate communication of some of these projects. So the beneficiaries, in most circumstances, the beneficiaries don't have a grasp of what they're entitled to. Like, for instance, if there is, let's say, the construction of a market in a particular locality, the information that is disseminated to those people is always sometimes very limited. Maybe you just see a signboard indicating the contractor and all of that, the amount, and all of that. Yeah, it's not really participatory. And then, considering that, we don't also have an information act in place where maybe an enlightened villager can go and say, okay, we're supposed to build this market, treasurer, how much have you disbursed over to this contractor? Because that's a public information that somebody can have, but we don't have those laws that can guarantee that. So there's limited follow-up. If we could have this public participation, we'll be able to hold some of these contractors to account, especially at the local level, which is lacking. So I think if we can work on that, it's going to help.
Thank you very much, Henry Kwam. Your last word.
So I think in order for us to improve the execution of the budget, well, we need a holistic approach. I think what Blaise said earlier, we have to digitize, yes, but we also need strong public finance management, and that requires competent civil servants. And we also have to ensure that we conduct regular audits and involve citizens in the execution of contracts. But finally, I also want to state that it's important that the budget moves from being about roads and ports to also about investing in Cameroon's industrial capacity.
Thank you very much. Honorable, you have the last word on the set.
My last word is, Cameroonians, we have to be very conscious of the fact that this country belongs to you and I, and we have to give it on to the next generation. Ask yourself, what have I done in where I am, such that the condition of the next Cameroonian coming can be bettered off, because it doesn't help us amassing wealth for ourselves, but investing in such a way that each and every Cameroonian benefits tomorrow. And those who are called to execute public contracts, execute them in such a way that you know that I am doing this for my country.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I think that is what you're going to take to the National Assembly during this November budgetary session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That's what we had time for on today's edition of Press Hour. And if there is anything you missed out on this program, don't you worry. You just need to get glued to your screen, CRTV Premium. On Monday at 2:30, you will have this program rebroadcast fully. And if you didn't have time on Monday, just go to CRTV News on Wednesday after the news in the French language. That will be at 9 p.m. Thank you very much for watching.